I'd like to ask you, Kevin, in terms of your view on the fish meal and fish oil supply, and kind of perhaps talk a little bit about the other 50% and what that looks like. We've had a conversation recently, and you mentioned that you've just come back from a lengthy stay in Southeast Asia, and you've kind of seen this, this uncertified supply up close. And I just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, and this is really a huge problem in most parts of Asia where there aren't very many certified fisheries. The overfishing is rampant. The quality of the fish meal is abysmal. It's really difficult when feed formulators, feed mills try to work with the product that's available. The prices are extremely volatile. Quality is poor in many cases. And this includes some of the biggest aquaculture countries. I mean, China, Indonesia, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh are dealing with this on a daily basis. And the supplies from those countries and the places they buy from are fishing down the food chain. They're taking any small fish that they can get. We have all kinds of labor issues with the industry. I mean, I applaud IFFO for the work that they're doing with the FIPS and other groups trying to address this, and especially places like Mauritania, rest of Africa. But there's lots of documented cases where there's corruption involved, countries that we know of, all of us do, who are IUU practitioners, if you will. So it's really a huge problem that I really applaud IFFO for trying to address it, but it's going to be a problem that's going to be with us for a long time.
Kevin, if you look at the global aquaculture industry, and I know that you're a global expert on, for example, the tilapia industry especially, and some of these species could really take off and become more of the protein supply in the world. What's your view on how we find the ingredients to basically underpin this growth?
Sure. First of all, we need to go back and recognize that most of the aquaculture in the world are these species. The carps, the tilapias, the catfish, as Dominique mentioned, they provide most of the seafood in the world, not farmed salmon, which is really a small portion when we look globally. And most of those species, as Dominique correctly pointed out, have very little demand for fish meal or fish oil. And in much of the world, they don't use any fish meal or fish oil. Most of the carp in China are fed with other ingredients. So a huge part of the world doesn't use any fish meal, fish oil for aquaculture. And as Enrico said, I mean, the more that we can take byproducts and use them as a source of fish meal and fish oil is great. But again, when we look at Asia, there's very little of that byproduct. What they leave after the family consumes a carp or a tilapia is some skin and bones. There's not much you're going to recover out of that. And even in the West, the companies are getting more and more efficient all the time at recovering edible product, whether it's fish sticks or fish balls. The quality of fish meal that comes from processed is all over the place. Usually it's high in phosphorus, things like this. So it's not going to be, obviously we've taken all the protein off when we take the fillets off, So it's not going to be a really high quality product, but whatever we can get, I'm all for. I mean, I think if you want to call it the rendering of aquatic livestock, yeah, we should recover that and use that. And if there's disease concerns, we use it for baby pigs. If we're worried about any kind of pathogens or anything, as Luis pointed out, there's plenty of demand for fish meal outside of aquaculture. So I think that there's going to be plenty of demand for these products. I wish it was higher quality from the rendered product, but there's still plenty of demand for that. And as the global industry continues to increase, as Dominic pointed out, the percentage of fish meal, fish oil is going to continue to decrease as more and more alternatives come online, and it will certainly be an economic decision. And as these different ingredients come on board and people look at least cost feed formulations, these various alternatives, whether they're microbial meals or plant-based or insect-based, algae-based, are going to factor into those economic equations. And as they keep scaling up, their prices are going to come down. Fish meal is, as we've seen, hasn't come down forever. It's an expensive ingredient, and the next farmer I meet who says fish feed prices are too low will be the very first one I've ever met. Every fish farmer says feed is too expensive. It's their major cost in most cases. So anything that can be done that will lower the cost, provide more ingredients, more options, is going to benefit aquaculture.
Right. Could you, Kevin? Could you just give a very brief overview of how you see the alternatives? Because the F3 really looks at all of those. Just at what stage they are in their development.
Yeah, certainly. And again, F3, we don't have any vested interest in any of these alternatives. We're not trying to pick winners or losers. Our goal really is to just educate the industry about how quickly these alternatives are coming on board. As was already mentioned, the algae oils already are taking a significant portion of the market. Their prices are coming down. Their volumes are increasing very quickly, as an example. And so that's one that, that's ready for prime time. That's commercially viable today. Also, as you pointed out, the insect meals, the amount of venture capital that's going into that is crazy. It seems like every month somebody's building the world's biggest insect farm, and the tonnage that are coming out of these operations is truly impressive. The microbial meals, again, we've got huge companies. I mean, the big petroleum companies and people like that are investing in these new ingredients, and people are adjusting feedstock so that they can dial in the nutritional value of these different meals, whether it be insect or algae or microbes. The yeast and fermentation people, they're jumping all the time at how they can adjust the nutrient profile of their products. So if you had to grade them, I'd say algae oil is probably the first one. Some of these different fermentation products is probably the second biggest, maybe even bigger in volume, but maybe not in value because oil is so valuable. Then the insect people, and then probably the microbial are the ones maybe bringing up the rear, but maybe in the long run would provide the biggest tonnage.
I've got another question which I'm going to direct to Kevin. There's one somebody listening who said, "What advice would you give a startup that is doing R&D on fish meal alternatives with respect to obtaining funding for feasibility studies?"
Okay, good question. So obviously it depends somewhat in which country you're in. I mean, in the United States, there are several federal agencies that are funding this type of research. They've actually been doing it for a long time. My colleague Rick Barrows had funding from USDA and US Fish and Wildlife looking at alternatives for fish meal, mostly vegetable based. He made a whole career of it, doing it for 30 years, essentially, and showed that with the salmonids, there is no innate need for fish meal or fish oil. Economically, as several people point out, maybe you want 2-3% economically, but nutritionally, they don't need it. You need the nutrients, whether those amino acids or fatty acids come from different sources doesn't make any more difference for a fish than it does for a human. As long as you get all the nutrition there, the ingredient does not matter. Now, we got to be sure about all the micronutrients and all the vitamins, minerals, etc. But as Dominique pointed out, there is software out there that helps us to do that. Anyway, back to the other sources. Private sector. The private sector is keen on these things, whether it's venture capital companies, whether it's big banks, whether it's big corporations. If you have a pretty good initial product, your research is looking promising, there's plenty of private sector avenues there. We have outfits like AquaSpark and Hatch and these incubator outfits that are always on the lookout for promising research and promising new products. And so these kind of angel type investors would be very keen if somebody's got a good product. And basically, I mean, we're talking, if we go to the basic of it, as Luis was pointing out, why are we worried about an ingredient, about what the president's political persuasion is? And that's going to affect the aquaculture industry around the world. We have got to get away from a focus on wild capture, whether it's mesopelagic or whatever, to farmed ingredients that are not subject to who's the president or which capture method you're using or which total allowable catch for this year is going to be. That's crazy. I mean, we should not be trying to run a worldwide industry of an agricultural-based industry on harvesting wild products from nature. There's no other livestock industry that's trying to do that. So it's going to move very quickly into these alternative products that have got stable prices, stable volumes, and it'll probably be a mix of all the above. Insects, algae, microbes. I mean, look at what soy has done. The soy people 40 years ago started with some innovative products, and now it makes up whatever, 25, 30, 35% of all the aqua feed in the whole world. That's where we're going to go.